All right, so now we have our facings, our front facings, and it is attached to a back facing that only goes over the shoulder blade, right? So the directions have you guys turning this under, I think 1/4 of an inch, and top stitching. You can feel free to bind this edge so it looks nice. That's what I would suggest doing. Just like we put on, right, the collar stand onto the collar, we did that with the facings, right? We even labeled them, right? The top versus the facing versus the bottom part attached to the jacket. So just like we put on this collar and collar stand to the jacket itself, the jacket muslin, we're going to do the same thing to the facings, right? The only difference is these are all interfaced. We're going to match, right? Starting here at the center front, or at least at the lapel, we're going to match those dots. In this case, X's, which work really well. And we stay stitched so that we can kind of clip as we go to have it fit a little bit more flat. Okay, so that's why we stay stitched. And the important thing here is to really not go, when we stitch, not to go beyond the dots at the front lapel, because again, this will be treated separately when we sew facing to jacket in the in the real fabric. This is a muslin. All right, so this is again the collar being pinned to. And the weird thing, actually, is the fact that this doesn't go the whole way around, right? So you're going to have, at the center back, this is going to be open here, okay? And it's open because technically the pattern itself, right, has a lining that usually will get sewn to here, but we'll just end up binding that edge after it's all in there. Okay, so when it's all pinned, you'll notice that, again, on the collar stand, there is this open space, right? So this will be open. These will go over the shoulder blades. And we'll go ahead and stitch all this together before we press it out and then attach it to the jacket itself. So facing to jacket. So after you stitch it all in place, right, you only stitch to the large dots, right? Never go beyond. We can actually grade and trim down those seams. So that way there's a little bit less bulk. And just don't go beyond the stitch line when you're grading and trimming. So here is the jacket, right? Collar, stand, everything's trimmed. We've clipped into, we've clipped into the seam allowances. As you can see, right, the lining, or excuse me, the facing is a little bit larger in the width. But I would start, since we definitely know, right, that these two get sewn together, meaning the collars, I would start with the collar edges, pin those together, right, and again, there's only a size difference in the width, so the length should be good. If you want to match centers and then pin outwards from there, that works. When you're done doing the whole thing, what I would do is start here at the edge of the collar and treat it as a separate entity. Stitch up and around and come back down to the dot, right? And the dot is basically, right, where the lapels, right, meet the collar. We're going to stitch all this down, the collar first, and then we're going to come back and pin together the lapel and stitch that all together second. So that way this remains separate with its seam allowances being completely separate from the collar seam allowances, right? Because the minute you roll over or stitch over one, it's not going to turn and have that nice sharp angle. Okay, so there it is all stitched together. And again, I'm going to sew together the lapel separately. And I might as well at this point, right, since we got to do it anyway, is go ahead and grade, right, and trim, grade, and then of course, go ahead and clip your corners, right, do that little sort of carrot top, and do that to the whole collar, and then we're going to stitch together the lapels. So again, this is all out of the way. We sewed it all together. I decided to just draw in my 5/8 inch seam line just so I can get a nice point instead of trying to follow it along the sewing machine seam gauge. All right, so when sewing the rest of the facing, after you get the point up here on the lapel, there might be a little bit of ease right in this area to allow it to be turned to the outside. So what I would do is just follow the pattern down to the very bottom, right, where it meets the excess hem allowance here. And I would start pinning down here and then work my way up. And if there's any amount of ease, it'll be in this lapel area, right, above the buttonhole up to the point of the lapel. Okay, and again, on the bottom of the facing, I would sew all the way to the edge, right? So that way when we start grading, trimming, turning it inside out, right, your hem will be already in place. Don't forget also to snip, right, to the inner corner, right, of this, where the collar meets the lapel. And then you could just continue, right, grading and trimming the point so we can turn it. After everything's pressed, turn to the inside out, right, on proper men's tailored jackets, the collar and lapel, which I should press a little bit more on our muslin, usually gets on the underside, right, the part that doesn't show, usually gets hand whip stitched together, you know, just a simple stitch to hold it together, right, so that way when it's flipped to the outside, it always stays nice and together. It also, again, all the way up to the collar. Also, again, for in and out of the closet, it doesn't get dog-eared. But this can be done after the whole jacket is completed.